In the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 15, Jesus is being led to the cross, and it says the soldiers took Jesus into the courtyard, and they come out and he's been whipped, and they come out and they dress him in a purple robe, and they bring out the whole regiment, and they're just there to mock them. Now these soldiers, these are part of the Roman war machine. These guys are accustomed to dealing with death. They torture people. They've probably all killed people with their own hands. And so they're numb to this, and they're just having fun with Jesus. They're just mocking him. They're pretending to worship him. They're saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and they put the crown of thorns on him, and they just brutalize him. They beat him. They spit on him. And Jesus takes it. Jesus knew why he came. It was for this purpose. And after a while, it literally says when they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put on his own clothes again. And they led him away to be crucified. And as they're winding down the streets to take him to Golgotha, the place where the crucifixion will happen, Jesus he's physically exhausted. He is been beaten almost beyond recognition. Some people think that actually they put Jesus' own clothes back on him so that you could still recognize him as Jesus. And at some point, he collapses under the weight of carrying his cross. And he can no longer carry it. He's physically at that point. His legs quit working. And this guy, Simon, happens to be on the road that day, and he's probably going somewhere. He's got other plans for that day. And he encounters Jesus, and he gets pressed into service, and he gets told by the Roman soldiers to help Jesus. And the story of Simon is such an interesting story because it's what draws me into this scene. Simon encounters Jesus when he least expected it. And he gets called into service and called to do something that isn't fun. He's called to suffer alongside Jesus. He has to pick up this cross, this wooden beam, and it is heavy, it's probably splintered, it's bloody, and he has to pick it up and literally carry the cross of Christ. And it's this point of the story that draws me in, because I have to ask myself, would I respond the same way that Simon does? Would I be willing to suffer alongside Jesus? Would I be willing to step into this brutal scene, this part of the story that is not fun to look at, it's not fun to imagine? And would I serve Jesus that way? Simon literally carried the cross of Christ. And all of us this week have to ask ourselves the same question: would I do that? We have to be willing to look at the story, not just of what is coming in Easter, but what happens prior on Good Friday, what happens before Jesus gets to the cross, what happens as he suffers on the road. And we have to look at Jesus there and be willing to embrace that service that Simon embraced. We have to be willing to respond the way that Simon responded. Be willing to serve Jesus in a way that calls us out of the comfortable. Be willing to serve Jesus in a way that causes us to suffer. How will you embrace Jesus? How will you respond to his suffering? How will you serve him if it causes you to suffer? Those are all questions that the character of Simon causes me to ask.